Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. I'll tell y'all straight, man. Look, um, gentlemen, I'm sorry about being so busy the last week, and I still ain't caught up with everything, but we're really busy this semester. And I just now got back into my city from visiting my wife in her city. Um, she has she's turning a resignation, and so she'll come and stay in this city, inshallah. So y'all make dua that this will be easy for her. That Allah makes everything easy, especially whatever needs to be easy. Um, I'll tell you guys, man, on a real, something came up a little while ago, and I'm going to state this about the Black Manosphere, the culture, and who dies alone. And that is that number one, women have talked about men that are going to die alone, and yet they have collectively chosen which men will not die alone, and they've also collectively chosen that most men will. The men who will not die alone don't have to do anything and change anything to become the men that would die alone. The men who are not going to die alone actually increase their chances of dying alone if they clean up their act. They do more what women want or say they want them to do, they are more likely to die alone. Men who run women, well, first off, they're the men who can. And men who can do this and do it are the ones that will always have women. And some of you are going to say, yeah, well, duh. And if you say duh, then you're putting the cart before the horse. What I'm telling you is not, and though that would be logical in this case, you're not putting the cart before the horse because your logic is up to fuck. You're putting the cart before the horse because the cart looks like the horse and vice versa. And that's why I don't really blame people that are not experienced in this game for that way of thinking in the beginning. But I'm telling you now what it's really going to come down to. I'm telling you, it's going to be worse. You see, here's what it comes to in the end. You think that the men who are going to be able to never die alone act the way they do because they're the kind of men that won't have to die alone. But there are two things I'm still trying to get the Black Manosphere to understand, and they're really two halves of the same coin. And that is, one, the hatred that they have, and two, the immorality of the Western woman's choosing standards. The Western woman's choosing standards, especially with men of their own race, are anti moral. They're not immoral, they're not amoral, they're not independent of morals, they are anti moral. Morality actually ruins a man's chances. That's one thing I keep trying to get people to realize. Morality messes it up. The second thing I'm going to try to get you guys to understand and remember is that the second half of that, or the other half, is the hatred, and they go together. I mentioned the misandry, and I've told you oftentimes how many of their choices are against what you want because you want them, not because they don't want your choice. That's why it is that if you want to have kids, they'll abort. If you don't, they'll deliver it to term. It's all about whatever the hell you don't want. That's what drives a lot of their decisions in our community. And ours is the worst one for that. Ours is the absolute worst community around for that. That's why it is that sometimes when women, I respect women's right to chastity, but I don't necessarily Um, I don't respect the bare bones instinct that many of them have regarding that. I want them to actually understand why they don't like who they like, why they don't like who they don't like. And I want them to realize the difference between the ick that they have for most men and actual chastity. That's why it is that two women can tell most men the same thing and get two different responses. The reasons for telling these men the same thing would be the reasons for the different responses they get. One chick just has an ego. She just likes saying no. And if she doesn't get a chance to say no, she'll make a chance. You'll see women sit up here and chase down opportunities to reject men, but will never chase down even the men that are good for them. I mention this because the culture is jacked up. And the immorality of this mate selection is a large part of what drives the culture. A lot of the men in our particular community, in our population, make the choices that they make because they don't want to be unchosen. And I don't blame them for that either. But the issue comes down to they don't stop to critically think and analytically think. And the black manosphere is now driving this analytical thinking. The black manosphere is what is now saying it's overdue, it's past time, it is decades late in the time to become a thinking black man, a TBM, an NS black man, non-stereotype or non-stereotypical. It is it is time. It is actually decades late, past the time to start analyzing them and asking questions about what they choose and why they choose it. It is not proper to sit up and say they're an unimportant part of life. It is proper to understand and analyze them because they're naturally important, but they've chosen to abuse it. So we have to understand. It's sort of like living. It's like living with a government. Government is important in life. If it's jacked up, then it's important. But you have to understand what you must do in order to get around the government because of the needs that it will create but will not fulfill. That's what you have to do. It's like these artificial intelligence technologists. You have to come to understand that in order to make money, they will come with ways to socially isolate people from each other and then turn around and use AI to try to help numb the feeling of the social isolation. So that people will then become psychologically dependent upon AI. Not for information storage and accurate memory and things like that, or maybe misconception correction, not for stuff like that, but even just for interaction. You can't rely on AI for interaction. You must go to it for information. That's what you do. You don't have time to wait for somebody to answer something. Okay, fine. Then you can go to AI for information. But you cannot afford to rely on it for social interaction to keep you sane. And they will turn around and create a problem in order to create its solution. And you have to understand that the Western woman is much the same way. The power that she naturally has by being a woman, she wants to turn around and abuse. So yeah, they were given a particular power over you as men were given power over women, but they chose to abuse it in the West. So you have to actually analyze and learn. And the black manosphere is what has turned around and put many young black men on that balanced path to understanding their natural importance, but also being willing to understand their abuse of this so that you don't get caught up in traps and bullshit. You see, all of the traps that they have set for the guys that they don't really want in the first mother cuss word place are traps that they have set because they would rather elaborately plot and deceive than to just be better people. And then Michelle Obama, knowing this shit full well, has the nerve to sit her nigger ass up on that stage and say, be better. And then diss Barack Obama. Not because of his political stances, which would have been a legitimate moral ground if that's what she took, but because of his human limitations as a man. I was a single mom for 10 years. Every parent feels like they're single for 10 years. Unless you start your life off financially ahead while you're young, you're going to feel that way. And most human beings will not start their lives off like that. And there's nothing they can do about it. It's not their fault. Women are running around here blaming men for the difference between real life and the lives of 1950s and 60s sitcoms. And this is not something men have ever controlled or been able to change. And the women are sitting up here blaming the men like, no, it's your fault that all this doesn't exist. Malcolm talked about this in his book back in the 60s. Malcolm didn't want black women to be ill-treated and disrespected, but he did say that they were a problem. And now we know even more. And for this, we actually have the same tech gurus to thank for that, because the internet, but more specifically, social media and the placement of so much technology in hand phones are the reason why we know a lot of what we know today, in addition to personal trainers deciding, black or white, to go ahead and start giving insight to what the hell they know. What have they seen? Because for them, once these women had all of their financial needs and wants taken care of, then they opened the sexual doors to these personal trainers. This is something that everybody came to realize and understand because of personal trainers and because of technology and the women's confessions, as they began to merely just go all out with the misandry. And understand this, one reason I tell you guys that AC's right, you can't deal with sisters, you can't approach them, and you got to be suspicious if they're willing to come to you. But I also turn around and I say you got to leave Becky be, is because behind the vociferous misandry of the sistren is the quiet, silent misandry of the antinatalist Becky feminist. And they are far more likely to be secretly into only other women anyway. And as much as some of us like to call every black non-American a tether, we have a Canadian who's half black and half white to thank for this, because he made me aware of this knowledge. You know who you are. Shout out to you and thank you if you ever hear this. I mean that from the bottom of my black heart, from the depths of my black mind. I really appreciate that information that you shared with us. The Black Manosphere has benefited, and manospheres in general, aside from Brad's manosphere, are going to benefit. Hell, Brad's manosphere benefits from this. And that's why I tell you a lot of the stuff that I tell you. That's why one of the reasons I say that you can't go after Sapphire, you can't pursue her, you can't pursue sisters, period, even the lionesses, but that Becky is on some other stuff too. One reason I tell you that one reason I say that is because I know some of the stuff they talk about behind closed doors, and that's the stuff I know about. A lot of other brothers know stuff I don't know. And the thing about the culture is that in our culture, the women are set up to make decisions as to which few men won't have to die alone and which majority will have to die alone and why. And it is the black manosphere that is changing this. So now what it means is that, see, historically women didn't have to die alone. And now the black manosphere is coming along and making it such that in our culture, the women who deserve to die alone are about to be the first ones to do so. And they're about to be identified by other women who are less deserving of it as the reason that they're deserving of it at all, because they listen to these dumbass, most deserving, vociferous misandrous system. This is a major step in the purification of the culture. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to tell the Muslims in the black manosphere to lead that charge. I'm not saying to get up, walk up to all the other ones and say, you ain't Muslim, step off, let me know. In other words, lead by example. Now, I'm saying that because that was our job, morally speaking, anyway. I'm not saying it out of hatred. I'm saying it because that's our responsibility. We have the more blueprint and fiber for this anyway. We should have applied it. But we did not overcome the gynocracy and the gynocentrism and the misandry in our minds when many of us took the Shahada, and therefore we tried to take a balanced view towards the opposite gender, but we didn't fine-tune that balance enough to compensate for the upped up attitudes of even a lot of the sisters that were going to take Shahada and come into the community too. Because we know that many diasporan, African diasporan women in the West, let alone African American women that become Muslim, come in with attitude about what the man's job and what the man's responsibility is, but there's nothing in exchange for it. Shaheed Bolson was a wake-up call in one regard. He showed something to us. What did he show us? Shaheed Bolson does not come from the gynocentrism and the gynocracy of the black community. He does not. Yet and still, some of that was programmed into him to where he thinks that even as a Muslim, there is all of this burden on men's shoulders and no consideration for it. That's what he thought, what he thinks. That's what goes through his head. And he sits up there and spouts this out. And this is a man coming from a community that is far less matriarchal and gynocentric and gynocratic and misandrous than ours historically. Now, he married into a community that's not quite that way, but they're becoming that way. He married into one. But it doesn't appear that she personally is taking that path and that route. I have no evidence that she herself is misandrous like this or unappreciative. It's not really my business anyway. I ain't got no dog in that fight. He and I would agree to that part. But what I'm saying is I'm simply trying, I want to make it clear that I'm not going to blame her for anything I don't know about her doing. And ain't looking to find out about anything wrong that she's done. It ain't my business. But that he himself, coming from a culture that is as that is less gynocentric and misandrous than ours, is still subject to this brainwashing. After he took his Shahada and became Muslim, we black men that are Muslim in the black manosphere are the ones that have come to understand certain things about spirituality, as well as understand certain things about real, true gender dynamics right now, even though they shouldn't be this way, versus what they should be. And we're in a position to lead this charge. There is a cultural reform that has been needed by us. There's a cultural reform that has been needed, period. But this is our responsibility to lead by example. It's our job. We don't determine what somebody else is going to believe, but we do determine what evidence our behavior is going to place in front of them. And it's about time that those of us that are red pill aware and Muslim start to tell the Muslims and the non-Muslims alike what we can see versus what was supposed to be. There are many ways to do that, but that's one of the things we got to start doing. Individually, you will have to know what it is that you don't know so you can say, I don't know the answer to that question. I know this answer that's related, and I know who to ask the answer to your question, and I have to get to you. But we're also going to have to start looking and looking at some of these scholars that may know stuff about geopolitics and everything else. And then when they start talking about things like your responsibilities and her rights, and they don't talk about her responsibilities and your rights, then you perceive the imbalance and you start saying, we're not going to go to this scholar for this. He doesn't know. He keeps forgetting about the rights of the husband and the responsibilities of the wife, but he remembers the opposite. So if you go to him, you're going to walk off thinking you worthless and you'll never amount to anything because no matter how much you can do, it's not enough. And she's okay for being that way. And that's fine. And we got to start looking at scholars that may talk that way and say, nope, never mind. What are the right? Who is going to tell us about the responsibilities of both spouses and the rights of both spouses and present that balance? And who's going to tell us what to tell these young brothers when they come across these entitled broads who demand the world all for nothing? What do we say to them? And where are the scholars that'll tell us what advice we can pass on to them? That's what we need to start focusing on in order to make it possible for us to better lead this by example. I'm sorry for being so busy last week, and I'll try to be less busy this coming week, but it's not looking too good. But I didn't forget about you all. And again, I thank those of you that came through on Cash App, S. Jock, Gale at Night. And I want to thank everybody that brought me over the 5,000 subscriber count. And shouts out to those who have been there from day one. You know who you are. As always, thanks for listening. I hope this helps. Black heart, black mind, blackout, assalamu alaikum, and black heterosexual non-select male power because they don't like it, and black patriarchy until extinction of Judgment Day. Thank you for flying with us again here on Jet Black Air, where the phrase jet black is also a verb. Keep jet black with us till the wings and the wheels fall off. Gender, justice, forever.